What the city is talking about.
The news that impacts you.
Welcome to the Montreal Now podcast.
We asked the question last week. It was a really interesting sort of reaction from many of you who were listening. And the question was about obesity and whether it should now be considered, at least in Quebec anyway, and covered by health insurance here, by RAMQ. A lot of people suggesting there's a cost to not covering it. First of all, it costs roughly, I think, $400 a month if you wanted to get on something like Wegovy. But there have been other opinions as well suggesting that, maybe this is not the best way to go. Clearly, it helps some people. But is it by helping those people focusing their attention on, treating a condition without making any kind of lifestyle change? So we thought we'd dive a little deeper. And I know we've had Chris Labos on before, and I want to get to our other guest as well, Dr. Joel Lexchin, in just a sec. Chris is on the line. Chris, we talked about this before, right? About obesity and whether governments here should start covering this. So what do we have to know, first of all, because this has been brought up on the cost of not doing this?
Well, I think the reason why we're talking about this from a medical perspective is that there are complications associated with obesity in the long term: high blood pressure, cancer, arthritis, heart disease. And so the reason why we are able to talk about Ozempic, Wegovy in a medical sense and talk about whether it should be covered or not is because we do have studies showing that it does decrease the risk of cardiovascular disease. So in this whole debate about should we cover it or not, somebody is going to have to explain why RAMQ will cover the cost of bariatric surgery to treat obesity, but not cover the cost of medication to treat obesity. Mm-hmm. Because the minute you recognize that obesity is a medical problem that leads to long-term complications that you need to fix in a carefully selected group of patients, why would you do it with surgery and not with medication that arguably is going to be more cost-effective and have less, at least upfront, risks to the patient? Because while bariatric surgeries are usually very effective and well tolerated, there's obviously a risk of bleeding, infection, and a lot more resources have to go into performing surgery than have to go into just treating somebody with medication.
I'm going to ask you to venture a guess, though, Chris. The idea of bariatric surgery being covered, I'm guessing there are far fewer people who would even consider doing something, if I can call it that, radical, as opposed to just taking a shot, injecting yourself with Wegovy and walking away, and you can do that for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and I think that's the issue here. I think the government realizes that if they open the door to this, a lot of people that would never have considered bariatric surgery would consider the medical therapy because they would be candidates for it, and that's going to end up being very expensive. And, of course, I understand that that's the issue here, but yes, it's going to be more costs now, but we have to think how much money are we going to save 20 to 30 years down the road if all these people don't end up having heart attacks and don't end up costing the healthcare system $100,000 when they have their heart attack, for example, just to pull a number out of thin air.
So let me take the other side of this because, as I said, not everybody is on board. Dr. Joel Lexchin is a professor emeritus at York University. He's a retired emergency doctor at the University Health Network. Dr. Lexchin, you think before we go ahead and cover the cost of this, we should spend a little more time thinking about it and doing what instead first?
Well, you're right. We should spend more time thinking about this. I don't disagree with what Dr. Labos had to say, but if it's $400 a week, or a month, that means it's about $6,000 a year. Mm-hmm. The study that Dr. Labos was talking about that showed a reduction in cardiovascular deaths and also in non-fatal heart attacks and strokes, people were taking the drug over a 3-year period, so that's $18,000 a year, or over the 3 years, and 1 in 67 people who took the drug benefited. So you've got 67 people times $18,000 over 3 years to get one benefit. Now that may be worth it for some people, but we have to also think about what else can we do with that kind of money. And don't forget that if you want to keep the benefits from using the drug, you have to take it forever.
Right.
The studies that have been done show that once you stop taking the drug, the weight comes back. You go back to your pre-treatment weight. So $6,000 a year for the rest of somebody's life, and only 1 in 67 people are going to benefit from that over a 3-year period. So,
can I go back to this?
If we want to spend the money, then we should do it.
Sure.
But if we think that there are better things to do with the money, then let's do those.
Can I ask this? 1 in 67, I've not heard that before. So, Dr. Labos, with respect to what Dr. Lexchin just said about the people benefiting from it, is that sort of now just accepted? That's the number?
Well, yeah, there's going to be some variability depending on the different studies. We'll get you end up getting a much better sense of how well these medications perform in a quote-unquote real-world setting when you actually test it out. Also, with cardiovascular disease, because it's a long-term thing, you tend to get more of the benefits further on. So the magnitude of the benefit is small on a 3-year period.
Oh, I see.
But if you treated somebody for 10 to 20 years, then those benefits would start to accrue. So that's right. Essentially, this comes down to a question of how much money do you have to spend to prevent one heart attack, and we don't know where those thresholds are. Right? Everybody's going to sort of disagree to some degree about how much money is worth spending. I think, though, if the argument that we're having is a cost-effectiveness one, then what we should be saying is the argument shouldn't be stop using the medication. The argument should be make the medication less expensive. And then we can get into a whole different argument about what can we do to drive down the cost of this medication to actually make it more affordable for the people who need it.
Would it make a difference? I saw a story, and I know it's gained a lot of traction over the past couple of days, and I think it's Eli Lilly, the drug company now, is coming out with a pill. So nothing you have to inject yourself with, supposed to be just as effective. Would that make a difference, Dr. Lexchin?
Well, again, you've got to look, what's the price that they're going to be charging? I mean, yes, taking a pill is better for a lot of people than having an injection. But right now, there are no studies showing that the pill will be as effective as the injection. It might be better, it might be worse. We don't know, and we also don't know the price. So at this point, with respect to a pill, there's just too many unknowns to be able to make a decision about whether or not it's going to be better than an injection.
Well, let me ask you, where would you rather the money be spent?
Well, I think that we can look at what are the causes of obesity, and is there money that can be spent on that? So what can we do about the way that foods are being advertised on TV, especially to children? What can we do about the food deserts that occur in poor areas of the city where you can go to your 7-Eleven or whatever the equivalent is in Montreal and pick up some high density foods, carbohydrates. Yeah. But if you want to go to a supermarket and be able to buy fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, it's going to take you longer, and they're going to be more expensive. So what can we do about the cost of healthy products? How can we show people that products are healthy? If you read the labels on foods currently, people don't have any way of making sense of that. It would be much better to set up a system of red, yellow, green, showing you how healthy foods are. We haven't done that. None of these things individually are going to solve the problem of obesity, but if we take them all together, we might be able to do something, and those things are going to cost money.
I wish we had more time because this is really quite fascinating. I'm reading text messages from people coming in as you're speaking, talking about the fact that, you know what, it's not simply about a matter of willpower, the cure for obesity. These are typical arguments that come up. I just wonder, Dr. Labos, just to wrap this up, this is about money. I mean, it's becoming pretty obvious it's about money. It's about money the drug companies are making, and to expect that they will charge less money to make it more attainable for people, if I can use that term. Does that even seem likely? I mean, why would you take a cash cow if you're a pharmaceutical company? They're selling this by the millions already.
Listen, you're absolutely right. This is completely about money. Fun fact, though, the cost of the drug prices in this country are actually not set by market forces. They are set via a very complex formula that the federal government uses. We have the power to pass legislation to affect drug prices in this country in the same way that the U.S. does, in the same way that the European Union does. We just have to exercise that political will. And so if we wanted to change the way in which we calculate and regulate drug prices, we could do it. But we have to be willing to do it and to expend the political capital to make it happen.
Yeah. All right. I'm afraid I have to leave it there. Dr. Lexchin, thanks so much for your time. Dr. Labos, thank you for being here this afternoon as well. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Bringing you the breaking news and the people making it. Montreal Now with Aaron Rand. CJAD 800.
There's a story, you may have seen this on CTV the other day, about a situation affecting hotels here in the city, in the province, to the point where one survey says 91% of hotels, 91%, are finding it difficult to recruit staff for the summer and the fall seasons, busy times in Montreal. Now, there's been a lot of suggestion here. I heard Elias talking about it this morning, and the suggestion is that, well, the reason they can't find staff is because, well, they're not paying enough. But it turns out that's clearly not the case. Andrew Torriani is CEO and general manager of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel here in Montreal, and he is on the line. Andrew, thank you for the time this afternoon.
Hi, Aaron.
You and I have been lucky enough over the years, I should mention we are friends, we've known each other for a while, and we've talked about this, and you sort of educated me, and I want you to do the same in this case, because I think people have the wrong idea that going to work in a hotel is really just a job you do, for slave wages, cheap labor, if you will. And that's just truly not the case. So explain what the situation actually is.
No, it's not the case. One of the things is that most of the hotels are unionized anyway. So in that regard, we have kind of standardized wages across most of the hotels. And, for most of these jobs, we have relatively good wages. They're in the sort of high 20s into the 30s. Plus benefits, plus pensions and everything else like that. So it's not that isn't the issue, in my opinion, of why there's a dearth of people being able to work here or wanting to work here. I think it's more a question of the type of work that we just don't seem to be able to attract people into.
Now, I know from having mentioned this before, a lot of this changed during the pandemic or right after the pandemic, right? When people left jobs and never ended up coming back, and hotels were pretty much affected then. This situation's only gotten worse since?
Absolutely. That's where, we didn't really have a problem in the years prior to COVID. I think it was viewed as a great job to work at for most people. COVID, what ended up happening is, hotels had like 7% occupancy, and so almost everybody laid everybody off. And, it's then that I think people felt that it was a job that could be threatened, and a lot of them went and chose other careers, especially the younger generation. More than the older generation, they went into companies in the events management or, just working in a different milieu entirely.
So how do temporary foreign workers come into this equation? Because we know what the government is trying to do here and has talked about for a while, which is reducing that number. Those people end up working in hotels, again, as you said, not because they need to find a job necessarily and will take any job they can find, but because I guess they enjoy working in the service industry, but as you just mentioned, because other people simply do not want those jobs anymore.
Yeah, there's two types. There's people who, see this as an opportunity for them because they've come to Canada and they see it as a relatively high-paying job that they can work at, and so that's why they come in. And the other one is that you get a lot of Europeans that are often Francophone speaking who see the opportunity, if they're in the world of hotels, to gain experience and to gain a broader scope around our business. And we benefit from that. So it works well because they often come around the summertime. And the summertime, we have in Montreal a cold winter, so that's when we're down to minimum employment. And then in the summer, we need to ramp up quickly for about 7 months, where you have people that come in and really, are there because they're able to immigrate into Canada temporarily.
So what are you asking the government to do here in this case? I know this is the issue over temporary foreign workers. Clearly, the government knows we need these people. It's not just the hotel industry. We've had plenty of people here on the show who said, you know what, without these temporary foreign workers, my business may have to go under. I can't find anyone to work in the kind of jobs that I'm offering.
Well, it's just that, at a point in time, you can cover these things with overtimes and things like that in the beginning. But over a longer period of time, it just doesn't work. And so at one point, you have to do things like close down some rooms, etc. So there's an economic impact overall. I also think we lose that reliability that we've had over the years of people like French students who come from hotel school and work here 3 years. They start to look elsewhere in the planet, Australia and places like that. So I think what we're asking for them to do is to help us get them in and allow them to work here for a period of time. They don't always stay longer than 3 years, but at least to help us get through periods of staffing shortage and help with the economic consequences of it.
But up until now, you're not getting that kind of support for the government. What's their position, Andrew?
I think the problem is it's really slowed down. I think their position is that it causes the housing crisis in Montreal or in the biggest cities. I'm not so sure that is the case when you look at the type of students that we're talking about. But that I think is their principal argument. However, in the long term, one in 10 people are associated with the tourism industry. This was done by Oxford Economics. And basically, if we start to see slowdowns, we actually start to see more unemployment in other parts of the hotel.
Yeah, it's a big business in the service industry, and as you said, it scales down too. When things start going bad there, it affects other industries, it affects other jobs in the city as well. I will mention, by the way, for people, I know I mentioned off the top, you're at the Ritz, and people think, well, maybe this is unique to the Ritz-Carlton. It's not, right? You're in an association of hotels. You're hearing this across the board.
Yeah, no, everybody's talking about this. It's something that we were able to rely on before, and since COVID, I think the biggest thing is that we had so many people drop out. So you get people that aren't used to staying in this industry. They stay shorter, and we need to be able to refill them all the time. Otherwise, we get into a situation where we just don't have enough people.
I want to get back to what I started with, this idea that some people have this misconception that, work in this industry is paying $15 an hour or $20 an hour. We spoke earlier today, and you're saying that when you add on benefits, because as you said, it's unionized here, these are pretty good paying jobs, right? These are some jobs paying up to $30, $35 an hour in some cases.
The net add-on from just the wage side, as I said, it's sort of say $27 to $33 is what we're paying on average in that area, and we add 40% to the organization on top for the pensions and health insurance and everything else like that. So it is a good job, and I think if you were ever to interview people here, you would see that they love working in a hotel like this. It's something that is very rewarding when you're actually here.
I wonder, too, with respect to the people who don't want these jobs, if I can say that, we talked about what happened after the pandemic. Do you get the sense, first of all, this is hard work, right, in some cases, right? Whether you're working in a hotel as a chambermaid, whatever your responsibility happens to be. Do you think, if I can say it this way, that there's a generational problem here with people who simply don't want to do this work?
I think there is. I think there's a sort of, it is very manual labor, and I think as Canadians we tend to be a little bit less manual labor oriented. Lifting a bed, as a housekeeper, it's heavy. And doing that all day, every day, it is taxing over time. And so I think there is a degree of that. I think part of that was that group of people that sort of, when we backfilled after COVID, we had people that didn't come in through the normal flow. They started in this business, and they do find it hard. It is a hard job. It's not the easiest job in the world, no matter where you work, whether it be in dishwashing, these are jobs that are demanding, and I think that is why the pay is where it is.
So, the pay is there. As I said, I don't want to keep harping on the same point. But again, it's important to recognize that, when you get this job in a hotel, you are part of a union. You are getting benefits. So people need to know that. I'm wondering for the summer season, obviously that's a big time of the year, tourism in Montreal. What does this mean with respect to what has to happen if you can't find staff, if hotels can't find staff?
Well, basically, we always do try to find a solution to that. We're not going to leave the customer in the lurch. But it means that you wear your teams out. And, there's a limit to how much you can do that. So this is the first year that we're really seeing the slowdown in visas. And it's become much longer and harder to get them. So I'm not sure where we'll be at the end of the summer this year. But, we'll have to wait and see.
Does any of the U.S. stuff have any effect on this? Like what's happening in the Trump administration with visas or anything like that has not been part of the problem, part of the issue?
No, that hasn't really affected us so far. In fact, surprisingly, we're still seeing a relatively strong U.S. traffic that comes to Montreal in particular.
Listen, I wish you luck. Again, I know this is not unique to the hotel industry, but it's an important industry here in the city. And, I hope the government can at least acknowledge the fact that there is a problem and it needs to do something about it. Do you have meetings scheduled with the government or the association? How does it work?
I think the association's been meeting with them regularly, trying to help get this to move along and to express the need for helping with us.
Well, let's hope it happens. Andrew, thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Bye.
Because you don't want to miss a thing. Montreal Now on CJAD 800.
Time for our Legal Corner. It is brought to you by Maserati Montreal, where you can check out the brand new Grecale SUV. Yeah, a Maserati SUV. Leasing rate starting at only 2.99%. It is an amazing ride from an amazing brand. See it at Maserati Montreal online. That's MaseratiMontreal.com or in their showroom, 8525 DeCarry Boulevard, Maserati Montreal. Let's go to Chris Dimakos. Chris, the number here is pretty startling. You say that Canada experienced one of its worst job losses last month. 62,000 full-time jobs left. And now it's starting to happen, and it's interesting because you think those jobs are done, nothing's going to happen, you're basically out of luck, but recruitment agencies are now working perhaps harder than ever. What's going on?
Right. So, there was 62,000 full-time jobs lost. That was tempered a bit by the part-time hirings, but we haven't seen these types of numbers since COVID. And it doesn't mean that companies have stopped hiring. Companies are basically recycling their workforce, and they are hiring in big numbers. And what's important to do now is usually when we have these types of situations with the labor market, companies instruct recruiters not to just put out an ad. They say, we want this person who works at this company. We want you to reach out to them through whether it's LinkedIn or whatever platform they can get in touch with them with. And they ask them, hey, do they want to come visit? They want to entertain the thought of coming on board with our company, a competing company. So it's more of a targeted recruitment. And what's happening is in that transition, there's a lot of legal consequences that many people are not aware of, such as, when you decide to leave your existing employer, if you're there for 5, 10, 15 years, there's a whole bunch of job security and equity that you've built up over the years that don't necessarily carry over into your new employment. So the way they approach you, what is said, the emails going back and forth, all that has a consequence as to whether or not, if things don't work out with the new employer, whether or not you can get compensated with severance like you did as if you were with your previous employer.
Hold on a sec. So you're leaving that one job that you've been at, let's say for 10 years, that's a good round number, and you're recruited to go somewhere else. And all that goodwill, if you want to call it that, you can negotiate that to go to the new place you're going? Is that the suggestion?
Well, that's the absolute, not only suggestion, but recommendation. First of all, you want to have the new employer recognize on paper your years of service or give you a fixed term on your contract so that you're guaranteed to stay there a couple of years. But if you don't acknowledge it, if you don't talk about it, if it's not negotiated, there's a legal term called inducement, which means if one company basically induces you to cross over onto their company and offers you incentives, that new employer has to be careful that the court doesn't think that you induced the employee to come, thinking that they would have a better, longer, more prosperous career with you, because if it doesn't go well, and it's often the case that it doesn't, the court might say, you know what, you've only been there for a year, but because they stripped you away from a job where you've been there for 20 years, we're going to give you a severance that's almost like one you would have had at your previous employer. So, both parties, all the parties involved have to be very, very conscious of what's happening, especially when you're this volatile in terms of the labor market. There's a lot of movement, and you want to make sure that if you're an employee, you want to safeguard what you've earned all those years with stability and with maybe a pre-calculated severance if it doesn't work out. And if you're a new employer, you want to make sure that, hey, if I'm hiring this person, I don't want to be on the hook for a severance that only represents with us if they stay with us for 6 months. We don't want to be on the hook for a severance package as if they were with us for 20 years, right? So it goes both ways.
So you actually point out the case of someone who'd been working at the same place for 27 years. He gets recruited. This is out in BC. He goes and meets the competitor that are trying to recruit him. He gets a better offer. He heads over. And, of course, as you just outlined, it doesn't work out. It's almost like the recruiter's not going to be the one to bring this up, or are they? Is this based on you?
Well, I can't speak for all recruiters, but they usually don't, because they want this thing to happen. And if you cross over, well, then they get paid. And usually they don't bring up all the instances that might be a barrier, let's say, for you to accept. But I would say that if you're in the type of work where the information you have is extremely vital, like in this case was an engineer with plans and with experience and all of the different industry expertise. Well, you could be a sales rep with a list of clients. You have to be very careful when you're someone that has a lot of important information that another company wants, because if you work with them for a certain amount of time and they are able to extract some of that information or expertise, your job might not be as secure as you would want think. So it's important, if you're going to make the jump, especially if you've had, if you've been working somewhere for 6 months, it's not a big deal. But if you've been somewhere 5, 10, 15 years and there's an offer on the table from a competing company, it's not just about salary and vacation time. It's about, hey, 1 second here. I'm leaving a tremendous amount of equity here and job security. What's going to happen when I cross over if it doesn't work out? I want to put something down on paper that not only shows me that you're committed to me long term, but that if it doesn't work out, I will walk away with something that's at least similar to what I have at my existing company, because that should be calculated with your salary. It's not just about your T4s. It's about what you've accumulated in terms of wealth.
Let me just, before we get out of here, let me just sort of put the shoe on the other foot. Let's say you get recruited, right? You're induced to go for whatever the reason is. And then, to your point, you find out, you know what, they just wanted this from that employee, and 6 months later, see you, you're done. What do you have that you can do as the employee?
Right. So in the case that I gave you with an engineer who worked for 27 years, they had nothing in writing. They had absolutely no agreement with the company, and they filed a wrongful dismissal suit. And part of that suit was the calculation of what damages were owed. The new employer saying, hey, he's been with us for 8 months, a year. He gets a couple of weeks like anyone else would get. And this employee and his legal team said, no. There was inducement here. You basically coaxed him to come over to you thinking that he would be there long term, offering him all these things. So you're on the hook for much of the severance that he would have had at his old employer. And the court sided with the employee, saying to the new employer, you induced him to come over. You got to share some of that responsibility if you're going to let him go, like his old employer did. So in this case, there was no agreement. There was no negotiations with regards to termination, and they had to go to court to get it.
It's, again, one of those cases where if you're that employee, it's easy in hindsight to say, first thing you should have done once you were approached is go get yourself a lawyer to explain what you could, in fact, be asking for to protect yourself.
Exactly, and put the numbers down that are not, you don't really think of. Salary is one thing, but I want to know what other advantages I'm leaving on the table if I jump ship and go to the competitor. That's the most important. Good advice, as always. Chris, thanks so much. Thanks, Aaron.
Because you don't want to miss a thing. Montreal Now on CJAD 800.
Carmi Levy is on the line. He is CTV's tech analyst. And Carmi, I guess we'll talk about, because when it comes to tech, of course, you'd always talk about the Pope. So how does the Pope Francis, the late Pope Francis, tie into tech exactly?
Yeah, it would be easy to assume that, what would the church possibly have to do with technology? But as it turns out, Pope Francis had a pretty intimate relationship with technology. He was speaking about it and calling for better regulation, better understanding, more morals, more ethics, almost from the beginning of his papacy. And that voice became even more, he became even more, focused on it the longer he was Pope. And so he started off by talking about social media, saying that we need to spend more time looking at each other, looking into each other's eyes instead of on our screens. He spoke and wrote passionately about social media's impact on kids, on mental health, and societies need to do more to ensure that children are protected. And then as artificial intelligence became more of a thing, he wrote and spoke about it as well, about the risks of AI to humanity, the need to make sure that we were always the ones controlling the technology, that the technology wasn't controlling us. And he was particularly worried about sustainability and equality, that he felt that AI had the potential to hurt methods of equality, to hurt our ability to level the playing field, so to speak, that the haves would have more because of AI if we weren't careful. And even right up until earlier this month, he was still posting on X. He was tweeting the need to be more ethical in AI development. And he was behind a major push. It was called the Rome Agreement, where major technology companies, including IBM and Microsoft and others, they agreed to develop AI ethically using a framework that the Pope helped create. So this was a guy that very quietly in the background was a passionate supporter of the proper use of technology. And throughout his entire life at the Vatican, he never let up on that. And I mean, that always, and I say this, I'm like you, I'm Jewish, so he certainly wasn't speaking to me as a follower. However, it was a message not just for Catholics, not just for those who followed him religiously. It was a message for the entire world. And I think he did a wonderful job with that. And you kind of hope that, as the conclave starts to gather and as they begin to the process of selecting another pope, you kind of hope that legacy gets continued with whoever, ultimately is chosen as the next pope.
Well, great story. I had no idea. Thank you, Carmi. All right. Well, let's move on from that. Talk about something closer to home, which is, of course, 3 days away from a federal election. And surprise, surprise, although it's really not, we're finding out now there's been a dramatic and continues to be a dramatic rise in fake political content. So you really have to be, you have to be watching out for this. And of course, the problem is you have to be able to tell what's real and what's not. And that's not that easy to do sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes they look incredibly real. And this warning comes to us from Canada's Media Ecosystem Observatory. And they're noticing this absolute spike in the incidence of Facebook ads that look like they come from legitimate news sources. So it could be CTV, it could be an anchor. I've seen Omar Sachedina on one. I've seen other, anchors from other platforms in Canada. The CBC has also been implicated. It looks legit. It's got the real logos. It looks like it came right off the website, except they're talking about cryptocurrency and promoting fraudulent investment schemes. And so if this shows up in Facebook, it looks legit because, I know Omar Sachedina, but the sad reality is you click on that and you're being taken to a website you probably don't want to go to. And we've seen similar warnings from Elections Canada, from the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, from the CSE, our National Cryptologic Organization. So this is epidemic now. And because we're in an election, cyber criminals know this, and they're adapting their messaging to kind of mimic what we're seeing as part of the campaign. So, the onus, the responsibility is on all of us to really keep our eyes open, keep our heads on a swivel, and be incredibly cynical about what we see in our social media feeds, because increasingly they're not legit. They're designed to get us to believe untruths, or in some cases designed to defraud us based on the fact that, I'd be expected to see election messages in my feed anyway. I may as well click on it. Don't take the bait.
Wow. Okay. Then we move on to this story. And I know you kind of point out here that this can be kind of terrifying. I'm not even sure how. So ChatGPT apparently can now guess where a photo was taken. How would this work?
So basically what they've done is they've updated the model, the large language model that drives ChatGPT, that gives it its smarts. Now it can assess photos, it can assess imagery, it can zoom in all by itself, it can crop, it can rotate, and it can examine them, even if they're fuzzy or distorted, and it can look for visual cues, like maybe a storefront sign. I'm standing in front of Schwartz's, and so it knows what the Schwartz's sign looks like. Maybe there's a street sign, like a marking, a street name on the corner, just off to the side of the photo. Maybe there's a menu, or maybe there's just a style of architecture. It can tell that I'm shooting down Sherbrooke Street, for example. And so it can pull all that together, and it's smart enough to be able to say, I know what that is. That's on, Boulevard Saint-Laurent. And sure enough, it's there. The scary thing here is we post pictures to social media and videos to social media all the time, and we assume that strangers can't trace them back to where they were posted. You'll want to be careful if you're taking pictures of, say, maybe the street near your house. If you don't want strangers to know where you live, you might want to be looking at what you're posting online, because now ChatGPT has this capability built right in. It's not even an app that you download separately. It's built right into the app that we're already all using.
I can see that, though, for police forces, this actually could be a bonus.
Oh, tremendously. And that's the thing. In the right hands, it can be used to solve crimes. It can be used by emergency services to locate things more quickly, to bring resources to bear. I mean, the potential for positive use is obviously there. The problem is the ChatGPT, or OpenAI, the company that brings it to us, they're not implementing any kind of guardrails. So they're not saying just for law enforcement or just for first responders. They're making it available to anyone. And even if criminals want it, you can rest assured they're playing with it now to figure out how to use it for not so bright purposes. That's the problem. It can be used for good. It can be used for bad. There's no protection against the latter.
Fair point. Last thing real quick, I'm fascinated by this. You ask, can your phone, your cell phone, last 10 years? And of course, most people, a couple of years, boom, you upgrade to the next best thing. But I'm sure for a lot of people, if your phone's working fine, why would you want to toss it? So can you keep it for as long as 10 years? Who's making this happen?
You can. So there's this company called iFixit, and basically they provide sort of help to fix your phone and determine fixability and find parts and where to bring it in for service. And then there's a back market which sells refurbished devices. They're partnering up to give you the resources that you need to keep your phone lasting longer. If it's working fine, but the battery isn't so great after a few years, they'll tell you what you need to do to replace your battery. You just go to the website and they'll point you to the right place. And you're absolutely right. There's no reason why we need to replace our phones every 2 years. As long as it's doing the job that you want, you may as well stretch it out a little bit longer, especially because now we live in a high tariff environment. Those phones are going to get more expensive. We're going to want to hold on to them for a little bit longer. Initiatives like this certainly help. And here in Canada, we look at, go to Best Buy, Staples, Apple. They all have refurb programs, and they all have resources available to you if you want to stretch the life of your phone a little bit longer. We just had Earth Day a couple of days ago. What better way than to not buy another phone and toss your existing one in landfill, but to keep that same phone working a little bit longer? Yeah,
just on that sort of similar note, I was thinking I'll upgrade. I have an iPhone 13, but then I read, and I did not know this, the iPhone 13, for people who have iPhones, is the last iPhone model that actually has a SIM card, as opposed to, having to go somewhere and get an eSIM. Models after the 13, there's no such way as that. No, you can't go to the airport, buy a SIM card wherever you happen to be, and just pop it in your phone. The SIM card, the slot, does not exist anymore. I didn't know that.
Exactly. They use a new standard called eSIM, which is electronic SIM, and you have to sort of become. There are ways to download new SIMs and to have more than one SIM on the device and electronically switch from one to the other. But it is a new way of doing things. We can still have our cake and eat it too, but it's not as easy as popping it out of one phone and popping it into another. Those days are over after the iPhone 13.
There you go. The things you learned. Carmi, thanks so much.
Appreciate it, Aaron.
Take care. Carmi Levy, CTV Tech Analyst.
Bringing you the breaking news and the people making it. Montreal Now with Aaron Rand. CJAD 800.
So here we are just about a week after the debates, the French debate, the English debate, and then the surprise just before the French debate got underway. The big story turned out to be who wasn't in the debate, and that was the Green Party, who were told by the commission that for whatever reason they didn't meet the criteria that had been set in place. A lot of questions around that, and of course, since that time, there have been other issues as well. Now, the story, I guess, might be that this commission be disbanded altogether for the way they handle things this year as well. Jonathan Pednault is co-leader of the Green Party of Canada. He's also a candidate, of course, in Outremont. He's from here, and he is on the line. Jonathan, thanks for being here this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Let me kind of go back in time. It's kind of weird. I know the party doesn't have much support across the country. I mean, it's roughly, let's say, 2 to 3%. But I think a lot of people felt bad about the way that your party and you were treated prior to the debates. How much of that did you know was coming, if any?
When it comes to the debates?
Yeah. You were invited, then you were disinvited. Did you have a sense that was going to happen?
Not at all. We learned about it the day of.
And what was the reason given? Because I've heard varying, sort of accounts here of why that happened. What did they tell you?
They kept changing the story afterwards. But look, the point here is that critical, voice, and I believe another voice, that should have been heard at the debate wasn't. And I think there will be serious considerations that will have to be made by the next government as to the people who sit on that commission. It's clear to us that the commission reacted to political pressure, but clearly the rules, the way it's set up, aren't don't serve public interest at the moment. We've had several people who have been calling in various parts of the country asking whether the Green Party was disqualified altogether from the election, which you can see is a major problem for any political party. So the way in which they handled things was inappropriate, and I've asked for the commission to be to resign from their positions. They haven't. It's going to be up to the next government to decide what they would want to see happen with these people.
So when you said there might have been political pressure brought to bear to keep you out, who would have brought that pressure? Like, to whose benefit would it have been not to have you there?
Well, certainly, the Bloc and the NDP, the Conservatives were pretty happy that we weren't there. The Liberals were kind enough to give us, to indicate that they would have fought for us to be at the debates had they been consulted, which they weren't. But once again, this party's faced significant pushback from conservative segments of society. I think François Blanchet really, was happy to be the only Quebecer on stage and could claim the Quebec mantle his. I guess there will be time for more exploration of what exactly happened after the election. But certainly it's there's no question that it's something that disrupted our campaign significantly. Yeah.
So based on the fact that the Bloc were there, Yves-François Blanchet was there, the same criteria were in place. Should the Bloc have been in that debate at all?
Look, the Bloc was meeting two of the three criteria. So did we, but somehow they provided a new interpretation of the rule in a way that disqualified us, and we think they themselves recognized the commission, that is, that there was infringing on the rights of Canadians to know all of the options. So hopefully, Canadians will keep the pressure up to make sure that this commission and its mandate is reviewed, and that we ensure proper, diversity of voices at the next federal election.
So you were the first party to bring out your financial platform. And of course, today we're talking about the fact that the Conservatives will be the last party, despite the fact they've had the most time to bring a financial platform. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I find it interesting that we were the first to release our platform. We were the first to release our numbers. A lot of media, including CTV and others, didn't quite cover any of it and continued to claim that we, it's a very interesting election for us because clearly, the sort of the more general media have written us off from the get-go. So a lot of attention, of course, on the Liberal and Conservative, making this or trying to turn this into an election between only two different choices, and I think that's unfortunate because it certainly contributes to the further polarization of our politics, and we see how that plays down in the U.S.
Yet, with all due respect, the polling from the get-go has been basically a two-horse race, if I can put it in those terms. You're behind the NDP pretty much across the country as well, even at 10%. If you're lucky, you'd be up at 2.5% or 3%. I guess my question is, how do you keep moving forward, realizing that, the polls show that there's not going to be any kind of a big win for you here? That's got to be pretty disconcerting. How do you just keep pushing forward?
I think the polls are difficult to move when media doesn't quite cover the things that we have to bring forth, which has been an experience not just through this election, but also prior to the election. But when it comes to moving forth, a lot of Canadians want to see a healthy Green Party continue to do the fight, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing for our members, for Canadians who vote Green, and for the future of our country.
I'm looking at a couple of things that are in your financial platform here, and one of them is a $21 an hour minimum wage. which sounds great on paper, but like everything else in a financial platform, has to be accounted for some way. We heard the Liberals say they were going to be spending $130 billion here. The Conservatives criticized them for that, despite the fact we don't know what their number is going to be. What's your number? What's your total plan would cost Canadians?
I mean, all the other parties are basically saying that they want to, cut taxes and increase spending here and there, but they're not talking about how they're actually going for, how they're going to fund their. The NDP now just did, but there's been it took them a long time. We've been very clear from the get-go. The corporate income tax needs to be increased. We need to have. We discovered during the course of our budgeting work that at 0.2% tax on financial transactions, not the ones where you go at the ATM and take out money, but the bigger financial transactions. A 0.2% tax on that would raise to $150 billion over 5 years, and that's a lot of money that could help pay for education, education transfers, health transfers, build homes in this country, reduce inequalities. So we've, part of our role in this democracy is not only to increase awareness about climate change, but also to challenge some of the assumptions that some things simply cannot be done. And clearly we've heard repeatedly from the Conservatives, certainly, but also from the Liberals, that we can't possibly spend more on social programming, and that I think that's a very disheartening and difficult thing to hear at a time when so many Canadians are struggling, and where we know that the impact of the tariffs is going to have is going to cause significant problems for many families throughout the country.
I wonder too. So obviously, what stands out from the Green Party is your policy on energy, which none of the other parties mirror, because even Pierre Poilievre, when asked, couldn't say that he is or isn't for necessarily, pipelines across the country.
Oh, he certainly is.
Is he?
Oh, well, I mean, he's been campaigning on that theme for a long time, and so is now Mr. Carmi. I mean,
they're talking about an energy corridor. Does that mean pipelines to you?
No, of course it does. They're talking about a conventional energy corridor. I mean, let's not rewrite history here. We've got a Conservative Party that's been completely enamored with the thought of spending our money to help fund an industry that's controlled at 70% by American interests. And now the Liberals are joining the bandwagon because of, how successful the Conservative propaganda has been. But we have two main parties here who seem to think that the future of Canada depends on its ability to continue to export fossil fuels that are causing the fires in Jasper and many parts of the country. So that's very unfortunate, and we'll keep fighting against these kind of poor economic and moral decisions by the two main parties.
Last thing I would ask, again, just to focus on this for a second, this imminent or possible imminent threat from the U.S. is the reason why this is important with respect to managing our own energy infrastructure, et cetera. There's no compromise for you on pipelines?
Then I have to ask why are we funding a so-called Canadian oil industry that's owned at 70% by foreign interests, most of them in the United States? If the threat comes from the United States, I mean, we have a lot of renewables here. We have all the potential to transform Canada into a renewable powerhouse, but instead we're choosing to spend billions, tens of billions of dollars into pipe dreams that most likely will not or could not be completed before Donald Trump dies of old age. So, once again, Canadians are being, it's sort of the, snake oil being sold by the two main parties to help benefit their friends abroad and here at home. And I think that's unfortunate. I think our public money would be better spent elsewhere.
But we read last week that China's decided to stop buying oil from the U.S. and that business is coming to Canada. Does that mean something?
No, it certainly doesn't. I don't think we should be helping China accelerate its development no more than we should be helping the United States accelerate its development. More right now, we have three revisionist powers: China, the U.S., and Russia, that are actively working against the world order that so many Canadians died for during the First and Second World War. And I think we need to work with democracies, the EU, Australia, Korea, Japan, and make sure that we collectively stand strong to defend democracy at a time when it is being challenged precisely by these economic and military giants.
And that's where we leave it. Jonathan Pednault, co-leader of the Green Party, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it. Best of luck.
Best. Thanks.
This has been the Montreal Now podcast
Listen live on your radio weekday afternoons from 2 to 6
on CJAD 800
or through the iHeartRadio app.